Amy had learned how to live with the pain. She had survived the long nights, the lonely mornings, and the empty space on the ranch where Ty once stood. But nothing could have prepared her for what she saw that morning. Through the early mist and golden light of the Heartland sunrise, she saw someone standing by the barn. Tall, still, familiar. Her heart stopped. Her breath caught. It couldn't be. But it was. Ty. She froze. The coffee cup in her hand slipped and shattered on the porch floor, but Amy didn't notice. Her eyes stayed locked on the figure ahead. He wasn't moving. Just watching. Just standing there. Her heart began to race like it hadn't in years, not from fear, but from shock, from hope, from something she didn't have a name for. Every part of her screamed that this wasn't possible. Ty had died. She had cried for him, buried him, tried to raise their daughter without him. And yet, he was standing right there by the barn doors where he used to wait for her in the mornings. Lindy came out of the house, chasing the dog. She looked up and saw him too. Her small voice broke the silence. "Mom, that's Daddy, isn't it?" Amy's knees weakened. Lindy didn't hesitate. She stepped off the porch and walked toward him, no fear in her steps. Amy wanted to shout, to stop her, but her voice wouldn't come out. She couldn't speak. She couldn't move. Her world had become too full, too heavy with feeling. Lindy stopped a few feet from him. She smiled. "I saw you in my dream," she said. The figure looked down at her. Amy stepped forward slowly, her breath shaking with each step. Her heart pounded in her ears. As she got closer, she could see the details of his face. The hair, the eyes, the smile. It was him, Ty. But how? Amy reached out, almost afraid to touch him. But before she could, he took a step back. The wind blew gently between them, carrying the sound of horses in the distance. He didn't speak. He didn't explain. But his eyes said everything. Love, peace, pain, goodbye. Amy's tears flowed freely now. "Why?" she whispered. "Why now?" Lindy turned to look at her. "He came to check on us," she said, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. "I told him we were okay, but I think he wanted to see for himself." The moment lasted only minutes, but it felt like time had frozen. Then, just as quietly as he came, Ty turned toward the trees and began to fade with the light. Amy ran a few steps, reaching out, but her hand caught only air. He was gone. Again, she dropped to her knees in the dirt. Her hands covered her face. The pain came back, sharp but different. This wasn't just grief. It was something deeper, like love that had been waiting quietly and finally had something to say. Lindy stood beside her and wrapped her arms around her mother. "Don't cry, Mom," she said. "He smiled. That means he's happy." Amy looked up at the sky, the light, now brighter than before. Maybe it was a dream. Maybe it was a sign. But whatever it was, it had opened a place in her heart she thought was closed forever. Amy walked back to the barn, but her steps were slow, weak, as if her body was moving while her mind was still stuck in that moment. Ty's face, his eyes, that gentle smile, it all played over and over again in her head like a memory that refused to fade. She reached the barn doors and leaned against them, breathing hard. The wood felt cool under her hands, but her chest burned. Something inside her had cracked open. Inside the barn it was quiet. Dust floated in the air, and the smell of hay and leather surrounded her. This place had always been her safe space, but right now it felt too full. Full of memories, full of silence, full of pain. Amy dropped to her knees beside an old saddle that still carried Ty's initials. She reached out and ran her hand along the worn leather, her fingers trembling. And then it happened. The tears came. Hot, fast, endless. She sobbed like she hadn't in years. Not the quiet tears she had learned to hide, but loud, messy cries that shook her whole body. "Why, Ty?" she cried into the air. "Why did you leave me? Why did you come back only to go again?" Her voice broke with every word. She hit the floor softly with her fists, not in anger, but in deep helplessness. The pain was sharp, like it had returned fresh. She thought she had healed. She thought she was strong. But seeing him, even for a moment, had opened up the grief again. This time it wasn't distant. It was right there, sitting beside her in the barn. Lindy walked in quietly, holding one of Ty's old photos. She had picked it up from the living room. She sat beside Amy and held the photo out. "I keep this under my pillow," she said. Amy looked at her, tears still streaming down her cheeks. "He smiled at me, Mom. Just like in the picture." Amy took the photo and pressed it to her chest. "He did," she whispered. "He smiled." Lindy leaned her head against Amy's shoulder. "Do you think he'll come again?" Amy didn't know how to answer. "I don't know," she said slowly, "but I think he came to remind us that he's still with us, even if we can't see him." Lindy nodded, quietly thinking. "Sometimes when I ride, I hear him laugh," she said softly. "I think he watches me." Amy hugged her tighter. That small voice carried so much belief, so much calm. Amy wondered how someone so small could be so brave. Later that night, Amy sat by the fireplace alone. The flames flickered gently. She stared into them, holding the photo still in her lap. She thought of all the moments they had shared. Ty's hands in hers, their wedding, Lindy's birth, the sound of his voice calling her name. Those weren't just memories. They were pieces of him. And now, they were all she had. She didn't want to forget, but she also didn't want to live inside the past forever. That was the hard part, letting go without losing him, moving forward without leaving him behind. It felt impossible, but maybe that's what his visit was for. A push, a reminder. Amy wiped her tears with the sleeve of her sweater. Her face was tired, but her eyes looked a little clearer now. Ty had returned, if only for a moment, and that moment had changed everything. The next morning, the ranch felt heavy with silence, the kind of silence that sits deep inside the heart. Amy sat on the porch, still holding Ty's photo in her lap. Her eyes were red, her shoulders slouched, from the weight of everything she had felt the day before. The image of Ty standing near the barn wouldn't leave her mind. His quiet presence, the way he looked at Lindy, it all felt too real to be a dream, but too impossible to be true. She didn't know how to explain it. She didn't know what to do with it. Jack stepped outside with 2 cups of coffee, one in each hand. He didn't say anything as he sat down next to her. He just handed her a cup and looked out over the fields. Amy took it, grateful for the warmth. For a few minutes, they just sat there in silence, the kind of silence that only exists between people who have shared deep love and deep loss. "I saw him," Amy finally whispered. Her voice cracked. "I saw Ty yesterday, Jack." Jack didn't flinch. He didn't act surprised. He just nodded slowly and said, "Lindy told me." Amy looked at him, her lips trembling. "You think I'm losing it, don't you?" Jack shook his head. "No, I think love finds a way, even when the world says it can't." Amy blinked fast, trying not to cry again. It felt real, not like a dream. Not like a memory. It felt like he was right there. Jack took a deep breath. "After Lindy died, I saw her too. Sitting in her chair, rocking, just watching the fire. I didn't question it. I didn't need to. It gave me peace. Maybe that's what this is, Amy. Maybe it's not about what's real. Maybe it's about what we need." Amy leaned back against the chair. "But why now? Why after all this time?" Jack looked at her with soft, steady eyes. "Because sometimes we can't move forward until we remember what we're carrying. Maybe Ty knew you were ready, or maybe he knew you weren't, and he came to remind you that it's okay." Amy wiped a tear from her cheek. "I feel like everything's breaking again." Jack gently placed a hand on hers. "No, Amy. You're not breaking. You're opening up again. That's different. That's healing." His words were slow and careful, but full of meaning. "You've been strong for so long. For Lindy, for the ranch, for all of us. But even the strongest hearts need a moment to feel. Amy nodded slowly. She didn't have the words to answer, but Jack's voice made her feel steadier, like the ground beneath her feet wasn't shaking so hard anymore. "You don't have to move on," he said softly. "You just have to keep going, with Ty's love still inside you." The wind moved through the trees, and Amy looked out over the land Ty had once walked. Her heart was still broken, but Jack's words gave her something she hadn't felt in a long time: permission to grieve and permission to heal. Not just for herself, but for Lindy too. Lindy came running from the barn just then, her arms open wide. "Grandpa Jack, guess what? I brushed Storm all by myself." Jack opened his arms and caught her with a laugh. "That's my girl." Amy smiled through her tears as she watched them. Even in the middle of her sadness, this moment felt right. Real. Full of love. Amy looked at Jack one more time. "Thank you," she said. He squeezed her hand and nodded. "We're family, Amy. That's what we do." Later that same day, just as Amy was beginning to breathe a little easier, a truck pulled into the ranch. It was unfamiliar, dark blue, dusty, and loud enough that Jack and Tim both turned their heads at the sound. Amy stepped down from the porch, wiping her hands on her jeans, her heart still tender from the morning's conversation. She didn't recognize the truck right away, but as the door opened and the man stepped out, her breath caught again. It was Nathan. He hadn't been around Heartland in years. A close friend of Ty's from the past, Nathan had worked with him during his early vet days. Sometimes they laughed like brothers, sometimes they argued like strangers. Amy hadn't seen him since Ty's funeral. Now here he was, taller, broader, with lines on his face that hadn't been there before. Nathan took off his hat, gave a small smile, and said, "Didn't expect to see so many familiar faces this soon." Jack stepped forward first. His handshake was firm but not overly warm. "Didn't expect to see you either." Amy walked slowly toward him. Her emotions were a mix: confusion, curiosity, and something else she couldn't name. Nathan looked at her with kind eyes. "I heard you needed help with the horses this season. Thought I could lend a hand." Amy nodded, not knowing what else to say. She remembered how Ty used to talk about Nathan, his stories, his strengths, and how much he respected him even when they didn't agree. Nathan had once been a big part of Ty's life, and now he was here again, stepping into the space Ty used to fill. That thought made Amy's stomach twist. Tim was the next to speak. "We've got enough hands," he said sharply. Lisa touched his arm gently, as if to calm him. Nathan didn't flinch. "I'm not here to take anyone's place," he said. "Just here to help, and maybe say goodbye properly." Those words hit Amy hard. She had never known how Nathan had handled Ty's death. Maybe he hadn't handled it at all. Maybe, like her, he had just buried it and moved on, until now. Lindy peeked from behind the barn post and ran up. "Who are you?" she asked, boldly curious. Nathan knelt down and smiled. "I'm Nathan. I used to work with your dad." Lindy's eyes lit up. "You knew my dad?" Nathan nodded. "Very well." She smiled wider. "Tell me a story about him." Nathan glanced at Amy, asking permission with his eyes. Amy gave a small nod. Later, as the sun began to lower, Nathan sat with Lindy on the porch steps, telling her about the time Ty helped deliver a baby calf in the middle of a lightning storm. Lindy laughed and asked a million questions, her eyes wide with wonder. Amy watched them from the window, her heart aching and easing at the same time. Nathan wasn't Ty, and he never would be. But something about his presence brought a kind of comfort, a reminder that Ty had lived a full life, touched people deeply, and was still remembered by those who truly knew him. That night, Amy sat on the edge of her bed, thinking about everything that had changed in just 2 days. Ty's mysterious return, the memories it stirred, and now Nathan, another part of Ty's story, standing once again on Heartland's soil. She didn't know why he had come now. But maybe, just like Ty's visit, Nathan had shown up for a reason. The next morning, the Heartland kitchen was unusually quiet. The usual rhythm of clinking mugs and morning chatter was replaced with careful glances and unspoken questions. Nathan had stayed the night in the guest room near the barn. Though he had been kind and helpful, his presence stirred emotions no one was ready to face. Not yet. Lou was the first to speak her mind. As she poured coffee into her mug, her voice was calm but sharp. "So, we're just letting him stay now? No questions asked?" Amy, sitting across the table, looked up. "He knew Ty, Lou. He's not a stranger." Lou sighed. "That's not the point. You're still healing, Amy, and he shows up the same day you see Ty again. It's just strange." Her words weren't cruel, but they carried worry for her sister, and maybe a bit of fear too. Tim leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "I don't trust him. Never did," he said flatly. "Ty told me once that Nathan pushed too hard with some horses, took risks, got people hurt." Jack frowned at that. "That was years ago. People change, Tim." Tim raised an eyebrow. "Do they?" Amy looked between them, her head pounding from the tension. "He hasn't done anything wrong," she said quietly, and he made Lindy smile. Lisa, always the soft voice in hard moments, finally spoke. "Sometimes people return because they need healing too," she said gently. "He may not say it out loud, but Nathan looks like someone who's been carrying guilt for a long time." Lindy walked in holding her drawing pad. "Uncle Nathan told me a story about Dad and a baby cow. He said Dad made everyone laugh." She smiled proudly, showing them her drawing of Ty, a little calf, and Nathan with mud on his boots. The room went quiet. Even Tim softened at the sound of her voice. Later in the day, Lou pulled Amy aside. "Are you really okay with this?" she asked. Amy nodded. "No, but I'm learning to be." Lou frowned. "Do you think seeing Ty was real?" Amy paused before answering. "I think it was real to me. That's enough." Lou looked down, her hands twisting together. "I just don't want you to get hurt again." Amy smiled sadly. "I already was. Nothing can hurt more than losing him." Meanwhile, Jack walked outside and found Nathan fixing one of the old gates. He watched for a moment before speaking. "You still care about this place?" Nathan nodded. "Always have." Jack took a deep breath. "If you're here to stir up trouble, you won't last long. But if you're here to help Amy, really help her, then we'll find a place for you." Nathan looked up, his eyes honest. "I didn't come for anything. I just couldn't stay away any longer." The conversation stayed with Jack. That night, as the family sat around the table for dinner, it felt different, softer, real. Pain was still in the room, but so was something else, understanding. Nathan stayed quiet, only speaking when spoken to. Lindy sat next to him, still full of questions about her dad, and Amy watched it all, quietly holding on to what Ty had given her in that one brief return. Clarity, strength, and maybe the space to let others in again. That evening, after the dishes were cleared and Lindy had fallen asleep with her drawing pad on her chest, Amy stepped outside for air. The sky was painted in soft purples and fading gold, and the cool wind carried the smell of the fields. She walked toward the barn, the same place where she had seen Ty. It still made her heart beat a little faster. As she reached the side gate, she noticed Nathan sitting alone on an overturned bucket, staring up at the stars. He didn't speak right away when he saw her, just gave a small nod like he'd been expecting her. Amy leaned against the wooden post a few feet away. For a moment, neither of them said anything. There was no need. The silence between them held everything they'd both been carrying. "He used to sit like that," Amy finally said. "Late, at night, after long days, just staring at the sky." Nathan gave a quiet smile. Said it helped him think. Amy nodded. "Said the same to me." They stood in silence again until Nathan broke it. "I never said goodbye. Not properly." His voice was low, filled with something deeper than sadness. Regret. "I was working far out when it happened. By the time I came back, the funeral was over. I thought maybe it was better that way, but I was wrong." Amy looked down at her hands. He missed you. He told me once that you were more like a brother than a friend. Nathan blinked quickly, holding back something heavy. I never told him how much I looked up to him. He was younger than me, but wiser, kinder, and braver. Amy sat down on a nearby bench. He never stopped talking about your camping trips and the time you pulled a foal out of a ditch together. He said you saved that little horse's life. Nathan chuckled softly. He gave me all the credit, but he's the one who tied the rope right. His smile faded. He gave credit to everyone but himself. That was Ty. Amy's voice was barely above a whisper. He came back, Nathan. I saw him. I know it sounds impossible, but it happened. Nathan looked at her, his expression calm. I believe you. Amy was surprised. You do? Nathan nodded. I've seen things I can't explain. Felt people beside me who aren't there. If anyone was strong enough to reach through the silence, it would be Ty. They sat in silence once more, but this time it felt warm. Amy turned to him. Why did you really come back? Nathan looked at her honestly. I thought I came to help with the horses, but after seeing you and Lindy, I think I came to help myself. Amy looked down, her voice soft. I've spent so much time trying to stay strong, pretending I was okay. But when I saw Ty, I realized how tired I am. Nathan nodded. You don't have to pretend, not with me. For the first time, Amy looked at Nathan and saw not just a connection to Ty, but a man carrying his own pain, his own weight. And in that moment, she didn't feel alone. I'm not ready to move on, Amy said. And I'm not asking you to, Nathan replied. As the stars grew brighter above them, they sat in quiet understanding. Two people joined by the memory of someone they both loved. And though Ty was gone, his presence was stronger than ever, bringing peace, connection, and a reminder that love leaves something behind, even after it fades. The morning came soft and silent, with golden light spilling across the hills of Heartland. Amy walked slowly through the dewy grass, holding Lindy's hand. They were on their way to Ty's memorial tree, a quiet place where wildflowers always grew and the wind always whispered. Today felt different, not heavier, but lighter, like something was finally ready to rest. Lindy skipped a few steps ahead, her small fingers carrying a drawing. It was one she made the night before, Ty, Amy, and herself under the stars, holding hands. Amy had watched her color it with such care, and now Lindy wanted to leave it at the base of the tree. So Dad knows we're still a family, she had said. As they reached the tree, Amy knelt and placed a new photo beside the drawing, one of Ty holding Lindy as a baby, both smiling. Her fingers brushed the picture slowly, then she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. I saw you, Ty. You were here. I don't know how or why, but thank you for coming home. Even for just a moment. Lindy gently tucked her drawing between two roots and patted the ground. You don't have to worry, Daddy, she said. We're okay now. Amy felt her throat tighten at her daughter's words. So simple, so brave. She looked up at the sky. I'll never stop missing you, but I think I'm ready to live. Again, not just for me, for Lindy, for all of us. The breeze picked up soft and warm as if answering her. Amy smiled through the tears. They walked back toward the house slowly. The ranch looked peaceful again. The horses grazed calmly. Jack was fixing a fence post. Lisa watered her flowers. Tim leaned against the barn wall, talking to Nathan, who listened with patience and respect. Life at Heartland was moving, just as it always had, but now with a sense of healing that hadn't been there before. Later that evening, the family sat around the dinner table together. It wasn't a special occasion. It wasn't fancy, but it was full of love. Laughter returned in small bursts, quiet at first, but honest. Amy looked around and realized something important. They were all still standing. Broken maybe, but still, whole in the ways that mattered. After dinner, Amy stepped outside one more time, watching the stars blink into view. She thought of Ty again. She would always think of him. But now it didn't feel like drowning. It felt like remembering someone who had never truly left. Back in the house, Lindy had placed Ty's photo on her nightstand. She smiled at it before curling into her blanket. "Good night, Daddy," she whispered. Amy stood in the hallway, listening. Her eyes were soft and her heart was steady. The grief was still there. But now it had a place, right beside love, not inside of it. And just like that, a new chapter quietly began. For more emotional updates and powerful moments from Heartland Season 19, make sure to subscribe to our channel Nextdoor. There's so much more to come.